Hey guys, it's Laura. Welcome to another video. So today's video is going to be my mid-month wrap-up. I have been reading a ton this month, it's best to do a wrap-up now since we're halfway through the month, and I can tell you about the eight books that I've read so far this month. In addition to those 8 books, I also have a book that I DNF'd, and then at the end I'll tell you the books that I am currently in the middle of. So let's go ahead and get started with my DNF, and that was Lyrial by Garth Nix. So this is the sequel to Sabriel, and Sabriel I read back in April, I think it was. I really enjoyed my time with it. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the world overall and the magic. This one, I didn't realize that we were going to be following a different character, although I probably should have known from the title. But yeah, we're following a different character, and I had actually picked this up, I think it was in either June or July, I can't remember which month. I picked it up, I read the prologue and then the first chapter, and I just really wasn't feeling it, so I put it down and I'm like, I'll try it again later. Picked it up again this month, didn't get much farther than that. I reread the prologue, first chapter, I think I got like maybe 3 chapters in, and still just was not interested. I just didn't care about the character, I didn't care about what the situation, what was going on, so I decided to just DNF it. DNFing the series for now. If I want to read this in the future, I can always pick it up on audiobook from my library, because the audiobook is actually narrated by Tim Curry, who has a spectacular voice, especially for a story like this. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and unhaul this book. That was my DNF. Now let's get into the books that I actually finished. So if you saw my August TBR, you know that I had my husband pick some books for me to read this month. He chose 5, and I did manage to read 4 out of the 5 so far. So let's start off talking about those. The first one I'll talk about is The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. And in this book, we are following a character from the main series who shows up. She's a girl named Ari, and she lives underneath the university where Kvothe attends school. She's a very special, very unusual girl, and in this book, we're just following a week in her life. There's no real plot or anything like that. It's just a week with Ari and seeing how she lives and what she does. Didn't know how I felt about this while I was reading it. I was waiting for, even though I had heard things, like people had told me things that this is very different, I didn't realize that it was going to be so different, like structurally, like you're not getting a typical narrative story here. So that was kind of unusual for me and made it difficult for me to get into it. And then, but I got to the end of this book and I was like, okay, that was fine, and I gave it 3 stars. However, I have not been able to stop thinking about it since I put it down, and I wasn't like emotionally affected until like the day after I finished reading this, put it down, and then started to think about it, and was like, wow, you know, that was actually a really deeply moving story. It's moving, it's touching, it's emotional. This different type of character than what we usually see in fantasy. Someone who is obviously neurodivergent in some way. It wasn't until afterwards that I kept thinking about it, and I'm actually thinking about rereading this before the end of the month, just to, now that I know what it is, go back and reread it and enjoy it. The writing style in here is absolutely beautiful. I think even more beautiful than in the main series, and it was poetic at times, like literally poetic, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Looking back on it, it was a really beautiful book. Like I said, I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I definitely want to go back and reread it and possibly give it a higher rating. We'll see, but I'm definitely glad that I read it, and it was something that I read in a day. It's really short, and the illustrations in here are really beautiful and just add so much to the story itself. So I definitely enjoyed my time with it. Next, I picked up Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. This is the first book in the new series or era in Star Wars novels called The High Republic. This takes place about 200 years prior to The Phantom Menace, I believe. And this is my first introduction to Star Wars novels. And I have to say, I feel like I've been missing out. Like, I really enjoyed my time with this, although I did have some issues with it. I had some problems, but I guess let me tell you about what this is first. So in this, we're following a time of incredible peace and prosperity in the galaxy, in the Republic. They are currently building this beacon in the Outer Rim. Jedi are at the height of their power, and there is peace and security throughout the galaxy. However, something threatens that peace when a group of marauders cause this huge catastrophe in hyperspace that leads to a threat for millions of people throughout the Outer Rim. An entire system is under threat, and they put out a call for help, not having much hope that anyone will get there in time, but lo and behold, the Jedi show up. But the problems that this catastrophe caused pushes even the Jedi to their limit. And then the rest of the book, we're trying to find out who these marauders are. We find out that they are a group of horrible people called the Nihil. That's the basic plot of the book. There's a little bit more to it than that, but like I said, I had some issues, so let's talk about those. So this is a pretty short book. It's only 377 pages, and for what it was doing, I really think that it needed to be at least another 100 pages longer. There were so many characters that we were following in here. We're following several different Jedi, and we're also following the antagonists, the leaders of this band of marauders called the Nihil. So we get a ton of different perspectives in here, and I just feel like we didn't get enough time to fully develop all of those characters. I think that throughout the novel, they're definitely not flat or one-dimensional or anything like that. I think that these are great, well-developed characters. We just don't get to spend enough time with them. Not only that, but I don't feel like there was enough time to fully develop the plot or to fully develop the antagonist, the villain of the story, which I ended up absolutely loving, by the way. By the time I got to the end of this book, I loved the villain. There is a leader of the Nihil called Marchion Ro, and he is shaping up to be one of my favorite villains. I'm really hoping that we get more development on him in the second book, which I've already picked up, by the way, because I ended up loving this so much. Even with all the problems that I had with it, really the main problem was just not enough time spent, too many characters to follow, and not enough development of the plot or of the characters for me to really be satisfied. And the other thing that I noticed about this, that there were certain like key phrases and words that were repeated over and over again, which isn't really a big deal, but repetitiveness is something that I really don't like in stories. And after a while of seeing that come up again and again and again, it kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit each time. So that was another negative that I had, that I found about this. But other than that, I absolutely adored this. I wouldn't say that I'm like a huge fangirl of Star Wars, but I am a pretty big fan of Star Wars. And this just captured all of the feelings that I get while watching a Star Wars movie. Do you know what I mean? Just that overall sense of hope, and the use of the Force is something that I've always loved so much. So I had like such a great time with this. I really did. And I'm really excited to continue on with this series and to pick up the second book. But I definitely recommend this if you haven't picked it up yet. If you're a fan of Star Wars, I think that this is a great place to start if you've never read any Star Wars books. So I really enjoyed my time with this. Definitely recommend. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. In my heart, it's 5 stars, but I gave it 4 stars just because of all the problems that I mentioned that I had with it. The next book I'm going to talk about is another sci-fi that I read so far this month. I've been reading quite a bit of sci-fi, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I adored this so much. This is one of my favorite books of the year for sure, and I don't want to say too much about it. Just like discovering this is so much fun. But we're following Ryland Grace, who is the sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission to save the Earth. The only problem is that he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He wakes up on a spaceship, his other crew members are dead, he's the only one left alive. He can't remember his name, let alone why he's there or what he has to do to save Earth. He has amnesia. He's been traveling for years to get to where he is in space to try to find a solution for Earth. And we follow him as he slowly starts to remember certain things and as he discovers, I don't know if the synopsis mentions this. No, the synopsis doesn't mention it, so I can't say it, but basically he doesn't have a lot of time, so he's racing against time to try to figure out what he's supposed to do and how to do it, and trying to discover this incredible scientific mystery. Oh, and I don't want to say too much more. This was amazing. I don't think that I've read a book that had that like amnesia thing before. If I have, I don't really remember, but I think that it was done really, really well in here. It added to the overall like tenseness of the situation, because you know that something terrible has happened back on Earth and he's the last hope. So it's very, very high stakes. It's very intense, very edge of your seat type stuff. And there is a character that I don't want to say who they are, but there's another character that we get to see in here. We also get flashbacks to like before he ended up on the ship, to see kind of what led up to it. So we do get those flashbacks as he slowly starts to get his memory back. But there's a character in here that I loved so much, and I really can't say much about them because they're not even mentioned in the synopsis, so I don't want to go into it. But oh my goodness, like the development of that character and of Ryland Grace and of their relationship, it just was so beautiful. This made me cry. This made me cry, this made me laugh, because once again it had Andy Weir's just like ridiculous but also spot on humor. I loved his humor so much, and I just had a huge smile on my face the entire time, and when I wasn't smiling I was crying from sheer joy or from just like being incredibly worried because I did not know what was going to happen next. Oh my god, I love this so much, and I wish, like, I really wish I could say more, but I don't want to give too much away. Like I said, it's definitely a book that you don't want to know too much about before you go in. I loved this. I loved this so much. 5 stars. Obviously, I think that this was better than The Martian. I definitely enjoyed this more than The Martian, which I never thought anything would compare to The Martian, because it was currently my #1 favorite sci-fi of all time, and now this is. I love it. Please pick it up if you have not yet. If you like sci-fi, if you don't like sci-fi, pick it up anyway, because I definitely think you will enjoy it. So we can see that my husband definitely picked out books that I absolutely loved. That definitely goes double for Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I adored this book. Who is surprised? No one. Ciri and Vivenna. Vivenna has been raised and brought up her entire life knowing that she was going to be sent to marry the God King in the city of Titalier. This is definitely a sacrifice that she would have to make. However, when the time comes to finally send his daughter, the king doesn't want to send Vivenna because he just can't. So instead, he sends the younger sister, Ciri, who was never prepared to go to the city, who was never prepared to become a bride for this God King. Meanwhile, war is looming between these two kingdoms. We're also following a god named Lightsong, who doesn't really believe he's a god, and he really wishes that people wouldn't worship him as one because he doesn't believe in his own divinity. And basically what makes people like Lightsong a god is when they have died and then returned. So in this world there is something called biochromatic breath, and everyone is born with 1 breath. However, you can gain more by being gifted more breath from other people. The magic in here was so cool. With breath, you can awaken inanimate objects. Brandon Sanderson has some of the most amazing magic systems, and I think that this is probably one of my most favorite magic systems by him. I really loved the way it worked. I absolutely adored the characters in here, both the princesses as well as Lightsong. Oh my god, Lightsong. I love Lightsong so much. He was so hilarious. I just enjoyed my time being in this world and seeing this magic, and also being with these characters. I ended up really enjoying, like I said, Lightsong, hands down my favorite character in this entire book. Probably one of my new favorite characters throughout Brandon Sanderson's work, for sure. I had the best time with this. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend if you haven't picked it up yet. The next book I want to talk about is Tiamat's Wrath by James S.A. Corey. This is the 8th book in the Expanse series, which is a adult sci-fi space opera series that I have been reading throughout this year and last year. Finally come to the second to last book in the series. The 9th book comes out in November, which I'm really excited about, but I finally read the 8th book, and I can't say too much about this, obviously, because it's the 8th book in a series, and things have gone so different now from what they originally started off as at the beginning. But I have to say, this was not my least favorite in the series, but definitely not my favorite either. I think this sits somewhere around my second to last favorite of the series. I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoy every single one of these books. They're definitely action-packed, although some of them are more slower, more introspective. After 8 books, I've become so attached to so many of these characters, and so many of these characters died in this book. And it hurt. It hurt a lot. But we're definitely getting to that point of the story where I really don't know that anyone is gonna survive this, you know? Like, I really don't know what's gonna happen in the last book, but I really don't have much faith that anyone will survive at this point. I really don't. But I enjoyed my time with this. I enjoyed the reunions that we got in here. I definitely think that the last book kind of scattered a lot of our main characters, and this book brought a lot of them back together, minus the ones who died, of course. There's a new character, not a new character, but a newer character that we get to learn more about and follow more closely in this 8th book, and I'm very excited to see where they go in the next book or in the future, because they are very interesting. I enjoyed my time with this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm excited to see what comes next. Okay, and then I have 3 books. The last 3 books I'm going to talk about are books that I just kind of picked up on a whim. The first one being A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. I had no intention of picking this up this month, but I was reading something else that was a bit heavy, and I think I needed an audiobook, and I wanted something that was going to be a little on the lighter side. Didn't quite get that with this, but I still really enjoyed my time with this. So this is a Alice in Wonderland retelling featuring a Black main character named Alice. Alice has recently lost her father, and then she gets attacked one night by a nightmare, though she doesn't really know what it is until she gets saved by a guy named Hadda. And Hadda tells her about Wonderland and how there are these nightmares. Basically, Wonderland is like the creation of the shared dream world of every human consciousness, and with dreams come nightmares. And these nightmares take the form of these beasts, these monsters that then slip from Wonderland into our real world. And Alice has signed up and been chosen to fight these nightmares. So it's all really badass, fighting, taking down these nightmares before they can harm other people. And Alice is not only dealing with taking down nightmares in Wonderland in a different world, but her real life and real world issues. She has a mom who, like, her mom does not take no shit. Her mom is very present in the story, which is something that I really liked about this. And she is pretty strict with Alice. So Alice has to deal with that while trying to hide this other part of her life from her mom and her friends, and trying to, you know, just having normal teenage problems like boys and high school, and also being a Black girl, which is difficult enough. So she's really going through it. She's going through a lot. And the catalyst of this story is when Alice faces a threat that she never has faced before, and it leads to lots of consequences. So I really enjoyed this book, and this was a total surprise for me because I don't tend to enjoy YA urban fantasy that much anymore. I don't know what it is, but I don't like having to focus on those real world problems. But for me, for this book, it actually really worked because it felt all of the problems, all of the issues that she was dealing with, the grief of her father, being a young Black girl in America, all of it were things that I could easily relate to. I loved how this used Wonderland characters, like characters from the original Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, in such unique and interesting ways. I have read quite a few Alice in Wonderland retellings. There was a whole like point in my life where I was reading nothing but, because Alice in Wonderland is one of my favorite stories of all time, and I love Alice in Wonderland retellings, and I just loved the way this used the characters in ways that I never would have imagined them in before, but it still had that whimsical, nonsensical aspect to it that is so prevalent in most Wonderland retelling. Really, the thing I loved most about this is just seeing Alice balance these two worlds and these two sides of herself. And of course, the literal black girl magic. I just really enjoyed this. I loved the writing in here. I loved how real it was and how unapologetic. It didn't hold anything back, which I really appreciated from L.L. McKinney's writing, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really excited to continue on with the series. In fact, I have, I don't know, oh, here it is. I have the second book on my shelf, but I want to read it closer to the release of the third book. This is one of the books that have been on my shelf for a while, so I'm really excited to have gotten through it this month. The next one that I picked up on a whim was Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. This is the sequel to Ready Player 1, the sequel that no one asked for and no one really wanted or seemed to like. And I totally get it. I totally get where everyone's coming from. I went into this with extremely low expectations because everyone said that it was just not good. So I think because of going in with extremely low expectations, I was not let down as much as I thought it would be, and I ended up, for the most part, enjoying my time. Definitely was nowhere near as good as the first book, which I really loved, but I will say that it wasn't as bad as I see a lot of people making it out to be, at least to me anyway. I thought that this was a lot quicker paced than the first book. The stakes are definitely a lot higher in here. I didn't really explain the plot, but in this one, there is a new kind of hunt for the 7 shards of the Siren's soul. So very similar to the first book with the Easter egg hunt. This is another hunt that Wade has to go on, and he is put into a position where he is forced to find these 7 shards within a short period of time, otherwise millions of people will die. So definitely higher stakes, definitely more fast-paced, I would say. And I'm not gonna lie, there were some epic moments in here, some things that I thought were maybe somewhat fan service, but also like I really enjoyed as well. But for the most part, it was just fine. I didn't think that it was terrible. I didn't think that it was great, unfortunately. I gave it 3 stars, and I really don't have much else to say about it. And then the last book that I have read so far this month is Blackout. This is by Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. This was so much fun. I picked this up because I just really wanted to read this during the summer because it takes place in the summertime, during a blackout in New York City, and we're following a bunch of different couples as they find love during this time. So it's just cute, fun, quick love stories set during the blackout in New York City. And I loved the way this was put together. I think that it was structured so well. So I knew that these were 6 short stories that were interconnected, but the way they were interconnected was just done so good, and it made it feel like it was one narrative story. I loved that. So basically we have a story that kind of runs throughout the entire book, which is called The Long Walk, and it's told in like 4 or 5 acts, I believe. So you'll have the Long Walk Act 1, and this is by Tiffany D. Jackson, and then you'll get a story by another character that picks up where the other one left off. So we have, like, it starts with a place and a time, like Harlem, 5:12 p.m. and then the next story will be a subway car, 5:26 p.m. I loved the way it was done. Like I said, it made it feel like it was one smooth narrative story instead of a bunch of different short stories. And we follow, of course, 6 different couples and how they get together. There's like friends to lovers, there's like rekindled romances. There's so many different beautiful romances and romance tropes in here. I loved every single one of these characters. And every single one of these stories, these were just so good, so much fun. I definitely want to read more from some of these authors because I've never read from Nick Stone or Ashley Woodfolk before, but I really enjoyed their stories in here. The only story that I didn't enjoy that much was one called All the Great Love Stories and Dust by Danielle Clayton. I didn't enjoy her writing very much, and she had footnotes. There are footnotes in here, which it really just made me mad for some reason. I didn't enjoy going to the footnotes and having to read it in a short story. Like, footnotes are fine in a full-length novel, but not in a short story. Just no. So anyway, I didn't love the writing in that, but I did love the couple in here. That was the Friends to Lovers one, and I enjoyed them as a couple. I just didn't enjoy Danielle Clayton's writing. But other than that, I loved every single one of these stories so much, and I loved the writing in here, and I just loved how it was put together structurally. And I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. So those were all the books that I've read so far this month. I'm currently in the middle of 2 books, one that I'll probably finish today, actually. So another one that I picked up kind of on a whim was The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. This is the 4th book in the Truly Devious series, but it's also apparently a standalone novel, which I do understand. Now that I'm currently, like 229 pages in, so I'm right here. And what I've read so far, you definitely don't need to have read the first 3 books to read this, so you can read this by itself. But I do recommend the first 3 books because they're really good and because you'll get more of a backstory on the characters. I really don't think that this gives you much in the way of, like, you know, introducing you to the characters and stuff like that, because you should already know them from the first 3 books, if that makes sense. But I'm really enjoying it so far, and I will reserve my rating for later. I'm really enjoying getting to spend time with Nate again because he was one of my favorite characters. But other than that, I'm finding the mystery itself to be pretty predictable. And then the other book that I'm in the middle of is Fall or Dodge in Hell by Neil Stephenson. I actually started reading this at the beginning of the month and put it down. I got 200 pages in and I was like, no, I can't do this. Like, I could not take the writing style. I'm still not a fan of the writing style. It started off being like very stream of consciousness, and then we moved on a perspective and we're getting 2 separate stories. I'm enjoying one of them. I'm not enjoying the other one. And once again, I'm still not enjoying the writing style, and it's kind of been a slog to get through, to be honest. But I thought I was just gonna DNF it and not bother with it, but I decided to pick it back up because the story hadn't really gotten started yet where I left off 200 pages in. So I picked it back up. I'm actually glad I did because I'm intrigued, but still not enjoying the writing style. So I am right here. I'm not gonna finish this today, but I will definitely finish this by the end of the month and give you my thoughts at the end of the month. So there you go, my friends. That is my mid-month wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know down in the comments if you have any thoughts or opinions on the books that I mentioned in this video. And that's gonna be it from me today. So if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye, guys.